There's a moment in every wolf's life that divides everything into before and after. For some, it is a first shift. For others, it is finding their mate. For others still, it is war or loss, or the kind of grief that restructures a person from the inside out. For Russo White, that moment came on a Tuesday night in October, in a room full of people who called themselves a pack, while the man the moon goddess had chosen for her pressed his lips to another woman's neck and made her his forever. She watched. She did not scream. She did not shift. She did not throw herself across the room or beg or rage or do any of the things that the broken animal part of her was shrieking at her to do. She stood very still in the back of the room where no one was looking, and she felt the mate bond, that sacred, luminous thread the goddess weaved between two souls, go cold and dark inside her chest like a candle someone had simply reached out and pinched. And then she turned around, and she walked out of the door, and she kept walking. No one stopped her. No one even looked up. They would spend the next 3 years asking themselves how they had let that happen. They would spend the rest of their lives understanding what they had lost when she walked out that door. This is a story of what leaves when someone who was never truly seen finally decides to stop waiting to be found. Chapter 1. The Girl No One Saw. My name is Russo White, and I was invisible for most of my life. Not in a way of outcasts or exiles. I was not shunned or punished or dragged to any borders. I simply existed in that particular category of person that large communities produce without noticing. Present, useful, unremarkable. The kind of person whose absence at a table takes 3 days to register. The kind of person who does a work that holds everything together and receives, in return, the specific invisibility of being taken entirely for granted. I was the Glacier Pack's healer, not the head healer. That was old Master Aldrich, who had held a position for 40 years and intended to hold it for 40 more. I was his apprentice, his very good, very capable, very quietly extraordinary apprentice, whom he had been training since I was 8 years old, and who had, by the age of 23, surpassed him in almost every measurable skill while maintaining the careful fiction that he remained my superior. I did this because I understood the politics of my pack intuitively. Glacier was an old pack with old hierarchies, and old hierarchies do not gracefully accommodate women who are better at things than the men designated to be better at those things. So I healed the sick at night when Aldrich was sleeping. I developed remedies that he presented as his own. I trained younger healers in techniques I discovered, and watched them credit him for the knowledge. I kept the pack's most vulnerable members alive through 3 harsh winters and a fever outbreak that should have claimed a dozen lives, and I did it all from a corner so unremarkable that most wolves in Glacier couldn't have told you my name without thinking about it. I noticed Alpha Bow and Glacier the same way I notice everything, carefully, from a distance, for a long time before I let myself acknowledge what I was noticing. He was Alpha by inheritance. His father's death in a territorial dispute 3 years prior had placed the mantle on shoulders that were broad enough physically, but still, at 26, finding their footing in the weight of it. He was not a bad Alpha. He was, in fact, in his better moments, something approaching a good one. Fair in his rulings, physically brave, genuinely concerned with pack welfare in the abstract sense that leaders who have not yet learned to see individuals tend to be. He was also beautiful in the way of things that are dangerous, all dark jaw and storm-colored eyes, and the particular restless energy of a dominant wolf who has never had to work very hard for anything. I noticed him. I noticed him the way water notices a slope, inevitably, helplessly, in the direction of least resistance. And then one night, at the autumn equinox gathering when I was 22 and he was 27, the mate bond snapped into place between us. It arrived like a sunrise and a warning simultaneously. I felt it the way all wolves feel it, a click of recognition, a warmth spreading through the chest, the sudden overwhelming certainty that the person across the room is yours and has always been yours, and the universe has simply been waiting for this moment to make the fact official. I felt it. He felt it too. I know he did. I saw it cross his face, a flash of confusion, then wonder, then something I couldn't quite read before his beta, Rashford stepped close and murmured something in his ear. Bowen looked across the room at me. I looked back, and for one long, clear moment, we saw each other. Then he smiled, not at me, but the polite, distant smile of a man categorizing an unexpected thing, and he turned back to his conversation. He did not come to speak to me that night. He did not seek me out the next day. He did not, in the weeks that followed, do any of the things a wolf who has found his fated mate is moved by every instinct he possesses to do. I waited. That is what I did. I waited, and I healed the sick, and I was invisible, and I told myself there were reasons. He was newly alpha. He had pressures I couldn't see. The bond confused him. He needed time. I gave him a year. In that year, I felt a mate bond every day, a warm thread connecting my chest ears, pulling gently, patiently. I felt his moods through it sometimes. Stress, satisfaction, occasional flashes of something that might have been longing. I used those flashes to justify the waiting. I gave him another 6 months. In those 6 months, I watched him begin spending time with Alexia Somerville. Alexia was everything I was not, in terms of visibility. The daughter of the pack's most prominent noble family, trained from childhood for the role of Alpha's mate, beautiful and socially polished and present in every room that mattered. She laughed at the right moments. She wore the right clothes. She knew every political nuance of every relationship in the pack. She was, in short, everything Glacier's noble families had been grooming for the Alpha side since before any of us were born. I watched. I healed the sick. I kept being invisible. And the bond kept pulling. And I kept waiting. And I told myself that the goddess knew what she was doing, and that the thread between us was real, and that real things had a way of eventually being seen. I should have stopped waiting much sooner. I know that now. But grief is not made only of dramatic moments. Sometimes it is made of a year and a half of almost recognitions and the slow, daily accumulation of being looked through by someone who carries half your soul. By the time October came and I stood in the back of the marking ceremony and watched Bowen press his mouth to Alexia's neck and seal her as his mate before the entire pack, I was not surprised. I was simply done. Chapter T. The night she left. The marking ceremony for an alpha and his chosen mate is the most significant ritual in pack life. Flowers, candles, the entire pack assembled. The official wolf priest intoning the old words. The alpha's beta standing witness. Decades of tradition and weight and significance pressing down on every moment. I stood in the very back, near the door. Because I had come as a healer, old Aldrich's joints were bad in autumn, and he'd asked me to attend in his place in case anyone required medical attention during the ceremony. The goddess's sense of humor, I thought, was truly something. I watched Bowen stand at the altar with Alexia beside him. She was luminous in white and gold, her dark hair coiled with silver flowers, her expression composed radiance of a woman who has spent her entire life preparing for this exact moment. She deserved it, I thought distantly. Whatever else was true, Alexia Somerville had worked for this, had trained for it, had wanted it, had shaped herself around the possibility of it with a dedication that warranted acknowledgement. She had not manufactured the circumstances of my suffering. She had simply wanted the same thing that circumstances had arranged to be available. I could not hate her. I found, standing in that room watching her joy, that I genuinely could not locate any hatred for Alexia Somerville. Everything I felt was for Bowen. He tilted her neck. She closed her eyes. His teeth met her skin. The mate bond, mine, the one the goddess had woven between Bowen and me on a warm autumn night 14 months ago, went cold. Not slowly, not gradually, like a light switched off in a room you were still standing in. Cold. I pressed my hand to my chest, once, briefly, a reflex. The wolf inside me made a sound that was not audible to anyone around me, a sound without sound, the howl of something losing the thing it had oriented itself toward for over a year. Around me, the pack erupted in celebration, cheering, howling, the joyful noise of a community witnessing a significant thing. No one looked at me. No one ever looked at me. I turned, and I walked out the door, and I did not look back. The night air hit my face, and I stopped walking for a moment and just breathed. The bond was not entirely gone. A marking didn't erase a fated connection. It complicated it, layered a chosen bond over a fated one in a way that the old text described as a wound that heals wrong. I would carry the ghost of it for the rest of my life. A thread to nowhere, a connection to a man who had chosen not to see it. But the warm, living, hopeful weight of it was gone, and in its absence, something else had room to breathe. I walked to my cottage at the edge of the pack grounds, a small stone building I had been given as a healer's quarters, practical and isolated, exactly the kind of dwelling allocated to people who matter functionally but not socially. I packed in 40 minutes. I did not pack sentimentally. I packed with the precise efficiency of someone who had spent years cataloging exactly what they actually needed versus what they had simply accumulated through inertia. My healer's kit. The real one, not the official one I maintain for pack records. My personal research journals, 12 of them, representing 11 years of documented work that had saved dozens of lives but carried only Aldrich's name on the pack's official records. 3 changes of clothes. My mother's ring. A small amount of pack currency I had been quietly setting aside for 2 years, not with this exact plan in mind, but with a vague intuition of someone who has always known, somewhere beneath the surface of daily life, that they would need to leave someday. I stood in the doorway of my cottage and looked at the space I'd occupied for 5 years. There was almost nothing here that was mine. The furniture belonged to the pack. The medical supplies on the shelves were pack property. The books were Aldrich's. Even the small garden outside the door, which I had planted and tended alone, had been catalogued in pack records as a healer's medicinal garden, owned by the position, not the person. I thought about leaving a note. I picked up a pen and held it over a blank page and thought about what I would write. Dear Pack of Glacia, I am leaving. You will not notice for some time. When you do notice, here are the things you will discover are missing. I set the pen down without writing anything. They would find out on their own. The learning would be more instructive without my assistance. I closed the cottage door behind me and I walked to the northern border of the territory and I stepped across it. And I kept walking. Chapter 3. What left with her? I am Rashford Hale, Beta of the Glacia Pack, and I am telling you this from the other side of the worst 6 months of my leadership career, so understand that everything I say is colored by the knowledge of how badly I failed to see what was in front of me. The first day after the marking ceremony, no one noticed Russo was gone. That should have been impossible. A pack healer disappearing should have created an immediate gap, patients unattended, remedies unmade, Aldrich arriving to his morning consultation and finding no apprentice. That is what should have happened. What actually happened was, Aldrich arrived at the cottage, found it empty, assumed Russo had gone to collect morning herbs from the forest as she sometimes did, and waited an hour before going home and taking a nap. By evening of the first day, 3 pack members who had ongoing treatment schedules showed up at the healer's cottage and found it locked. They knocked, waited, and went home. They did not report it to me or to Bowen because the healer's apprentice, being briefly unavailable, did not register as a crisis. It registered as a minor inconvenience. The second day, Aldrich could not remember the dosage for a patient's pain medication. This had happened before. His memory was not what it was, and he normally asked Russo to check his notes. He went to check his notes and found that his notes, while complete, used a shorthand system he had apparently been relying on Russo to translate for years without fully registering that he'd been relying on her. He spent 4 hours attempting to decode his own documentation before sending a runner to the cottage with a note. The runner returned, saying the cottage was empty and had been empty since at least yesterday morning. Aldrich came to me. I remember his face when he walked into my office, confused rather than alarmed. Still, the expression of a man encountering a puzzle rather than a crisis. Russo's gone, he said. Did she mention anything to you about a trip? I thought about it. I thought about the last time I'd seen Russo White, which required genuine effort because the last time I'd seen Russo White was at a marking ceremony 2 nights ago, standing at the back of the room where I'd registered her presence the same way I registered the presence of furniture. She was there. She was where she was supposed to be. She required no active attention. I had not spoken to her. I had not looked at her directly. I was realizing with the beginning of a chill that I didn't yet understand, thought about her as a person at any point during the past several weeks. I'll look into it, I told Aldrich. I did not look into it with the urgency it deserved. I put it third on my afternoon's list, behind a territorial boundary dispute and a supply inventory review. I am telling you this because I need you to understand how completely and entirely Russo White had become invisible to us, not because we were malicious, not because we were deliberately cruel, but because we had let convenience and assumption do the work of attention for so long that we had simply stopped perceiving her as a person who had an interior life, who had needs, who might at any point decide she had given enough. By the 3rd day, I understood the shape of what we had lost. The fever patient in the East Quarter relapsed overnight. Aldrich went to treat him and discovered that the specific compound Russo had been administering, the one keeping the fever from spiking into the danger zone, was not something Aldrich knew how to make. He had been signing off on it for 3 years, noting it in packed medical records as his own treatment protocol, without ever learning the formulation. The young healer Russo had been training, a 17-year-old girl named Pell, came to me in tears. She taught me so much, Pell said, but she taught me in stages, and I only have the first half of most of it, and I don't know how to. I had not known Russo was training anyone. I had not known Russo had a student. A pack member from the Northern Quarter found me by midday. Russo had been treating his young son for a bone condition since the child was 3, a quiet, ongoing care arrangement that had never been formally recorded because Russo had simply been providing it consistently and without fanfare for 2 years. What does my son do now? The man asked me. I did not have an answer. By the end of the 3rd day, I had 17 separate incidents. 17 gaps where Russo White had been quietly holding something together, a treatment, a training relationship, a research project, a translation of Aldrich's increasingly unreadable documentation that we had not known existed because she had done it all from her invisible corner without ever requiring acknowledgement. By the end of the 1st week, I had lost count. The fever patient's condition worsened. Aldrich, attempting to replicate what he thought Russo's compound was, created something subtly incorrect that caused a secondary reaction. The patient survived, barely, because I sent urgent word to a healer in a neighboring territory who could not fully replicate the treatment either but could stabilize him. Pell, who had more of Russo's training than anyone else in the pack, was doing her best, and it was genuinely not enough, not because Pell wasn't capable, but because Russo had been years ahead of anything a 17-year-old could cover. The pack's medical records, I discovered when I sat down to audit them, were substantially maintained by Russo's hand. Not officially, they were Aldrich's responsibility. Actually, factually, in practice, Russo, the organization system, the cross-referencing, the accurate dosage records, the patient histories, all of it, Aldrich's official contributions were the signature at the bottom of pages Russo had written. I brought this to Aldrich directly, in his office, and I asked him how much of the pack's medical practice he could actually execute independently. The old man was quiet for a very long time. Less than I thought, he finally said. He looked, in that moment, like a man who had just realized that the structure he'd been standing on had not been built from his own work. I went to Alpha Bowen on the 7th day. He was still in the warm glow of the new marking, still in the particular soft happiness of a man who has done what was expected of him and found it pleasant. He had not noticed Russo was gone. He had not, I think, thought about Russo White in any meaningful way in over a year. When I laid out the situation, the medical crises, the training gaps, the records disarray, the 17-plus ongoing care commitments with no one to fulfill them. I watched his face go through something complicated. "She was doing all of that?" he asked. "She was doing all of that," I said. "And more? Probably. We're still finding it." He was quiet. Why didn't she say something? I looked at my alpha for a long moment. I thought about everything I had also failed to see, about my own role in the architecture of invisibility, about the question he was asking as though it had an answer that implicated only her. "She was invisible," I said carefully. "We made her invisible. And she let us, because that was a deal. She gave everything, and we didn't look." Bowen was quiet for a long time after that. Chapter 4. What She Found in the Wilderness. I walked north for 3 days before I stopped. Not because I was lost, not because I was tired. I had been navigating by stars and wolf scent since I was 12 years old, and my physical endurance was considerably better than most of my pack mates would have guessed, given that they'd mostly seen me crouched over a patient's bed or bent over a workbench. I stopped because I found something that required stopping. It was a valley, hidden in the fold between two mountain ridges, accessible only through a narrow pass that a wolf unfamiliar with the terrain would walk past without registering as a pass at all. I found it because I was following the smell of medicinal plants, a specific variety of night bloom moss that I had been trying to source for 3 years and had only read about in old healer texts. The moss grew in shaded, mineral-rich soil near underground water sources. The valley had all of that and considerably more. It was, in the precise technical language of someone who had spent years studying landscapes and ecosystems and the relationship between terrain and wolf settlement, perfect. The valley floor was wide enough for a small pack's living quarters. The ridges provided natural defense on 3 sides. The underground stream surfaced in 2 places, creating fresh water access without creating visibility from above. The medicinal plant density was extraordinary. I walked through it slowly, cataloging, and by the time I reached the center of the valley, I had counted 43 distinct species that had significant healing application, including 6 I had only encountered previously in academic texts. I sat down in the grass in the center of that valley, and I felt, for the first time in a very long time, the specific quality of silence that belongs to places that are genuinely unspoiled. My wolf settled. Not the frantic, seeking, ever-hopeful settling of the past year and a half. The exhausted, vigilant pseudo-calm of an animal perpetually braced for a pain it knows is coming. Real settling. The kind that comes from arriving somewhere safe. I was alone. I had been alone, technically, for most of my adult life, in the way that truly invisible people are always alone even in crowds. But this was different. This was chosen. This was alone on my own terms. And the difference between those 2 things was a difference between imprisonment and flight. I made camp. I gathered food from the valley's considerable resources. I slept under the open sky. On the second morning in the valley, a wolf appeared on the northern ridge. She was large for a female, broad through the shoulders, with a pale gray coat of the northern packs, and she watched me from the ridge for a full 10 minutes before shifting into her human form and climbing down. Her name was Lucy. She was 31 years old. She had been living in the valley for 8 months, having left her pack for reasons she was not yet ready to share, and she said with remarkable directness, been watching my approach for 2 days and decided I was probably not a territorial threat. "What are you?" she asked, sitting across my fire with the ease of someone who had long since stopped wasting time on social pleasantries. "A healer," I said. "A good one." I thought about the fever patient I had kept alive through 3 crises. The bone condition in a child I had been managing for 2 years with a treatment I developed from my own research. The 12 journals of work that no one in Glacier knew I'd done. "Yes," I said simply. "A very good one." Lucy looked at me for a moment with the expression of someone recalculating. "There are others," she said. "In the valley. 8 of us currently. Wolves who left packs for various reasons and ended up here because..." She paused, searching for the word. "Because it felt right. I offered. Yes. She seemed slightly surprised I'd understood, because it felt right. I met them over the following days. 8 wolves, from 5 different packs, each carrying their own particular version of the same story. Useful, capable, overlooked. Wolves who had held things together quietly for years and had eventually reached a point where the gap between what they gave and what they received had grown too wide to continue crossing. A former pack strategist who had planned 3 successful territorial defenses and watched her alpha present the victories as his own inspired leadership. A young male wolf with an extraordinary ability to communicate with and manage livestock and agriculture, who had been assigned a stable duty because his gift was not the kind that registers as impressive in warrior-oriented pack culture. A female tracker whose abilities exceeded those of the pack's officially designated trackers, but who had been passed over for the official position repeatedly due to a combination of gender and the wrong family name. And others, each one a version of the same invisible excellence. I walked through the valley on the 4th day and I thought, the goddess has a sense of humor after all. She had let me spend a year and a half waiting to be seen by a man who would not see me. She had let me watch him choose a different path. She had let me walk out a door. And she had put this valley at the end of the road. Not as consolation, as destination. I'm staying, I told Lucy. I know, she said. I've been saving the south-facing cottage for you. The light is better for medical work. Chapter 5. The Building of Something Real. The valley had no name when I arrived. By the end of the first month, we called it Ashran, named for the Somerville trees that ring the eastern edge and the fen of medicinal plants that formed its center. We had 11 wolves by then. By the end of the second month, 17. They found us the way lost things find their way to the right place when the right place exists and has made itself available, through word that traveled the underground networks of the neutral territories, through chance encounters on roads between nowhere and somewhere, through the specific instinct of the right kind of person as toward the right kind of community. They came and I healed them first. The accumulated injuries of wolves who had been working too hard in environments that didn't care for them. And then I sat with each of them and asked a simple question. What do you know how to do that no one has ever properly valued? The answers filled 12 evenings of conversation. A healer's assistant who had independently developed a technique for setting complex fractures that reduced recovery time by 40%. A wolf who could read weather patterns 3 days in advance with the reliability of an instrument. A female wolf with an ability to negotiate between packs. A natural diplomat with instinct so precise she could feel the shift in negotiation before it happened. Who had spent 7 years taking notes for an alpha who couldn't follow the conversation she was managing for him. A young wolf, barely 18, who had taught herself metallurgy from salvaged texts and could create surgical quality instruments from raw materials. She had been assigned kitchen work in her origin pack because she was female and quiet, and no one had thought to ask what she could do. I watched the instrument she made, and I assigned her the corner of the medical building with the best light. And I told her to make everything she could imagine. We built Ashran with everyone's real skills, not their assigned roles. Within 4 months, we had a functional, thriving settlement of 23 wolves that operated at a level of organizational efficiency I had not encountered in a pack 3 times its size. Because everyone in Ashran was there because someone had asked what they could actually do and then trusted them to do it. I discovered things about myself in those months that Glacia had never given me the space to find. I was not only a healer, I was, and I say this not with arrogance, but with the matter-of-fact quality of someone who has finally had the room to observe themselves accurately, a leader, not the kind Glacia would have recognized, not loud, not imposing, not built on dominance displays and territorial chest beating. The other kind, the kind that emerges in rooms where decisions need to be made, and someone needs to hold all the considerations simultaneously and find the path through them that serves the most people well. I made decisions quickly and revised them openly when I was wrong. I asked opinions from the people with the most relevant knowledge regardless of their rank. I gave credit with a specificity that made people feel genuinely seen. Not good work, but that specific thing you did solve that specific problem, and here's exactly why it mattered. The wolves of Ashran thrived. And I watched them thrive, and I thought, this is what it looks like when people are given what they need. Word of Ashran reached the neutral territories in the 5th month. A traveling merchant came through looking for medical supplies. I sent him away with what he needed in the name of the wolf who'd made the instruments he'd never seen before. He came back 2 weeks later with 4 other merchants, 2 of whom had sick members of their traveling parties who needed treatment beyond what they'd been able to access. I treated the sick. I traded for supplies we needed. I asked the merchants, carefully and without apparent urgency, what they knew of the surrounding territories. And I began, quietly, to understand the shape of the world I'd stepped into. Chapter 6. What Glacier was losing. 6 months. I am recording this as a formal account because I believe Glacier needs to understand what happened and why, and I am apparently the only person willing to write it down honestly. In the 6 months since Russo White left our pack, we've experienced the following. The death of one pack member from a fever that should have been treatable. His name was Edrin Marsh. He was 4 to 4 years old. He had a daughter of 7 and a son of 11. He died because the compound Russo had been using to manage a condition was not replicated correctly in her absence, and by the time we located a healer from outside the pack who could diagnose what had gone wrong, 3 days had passed that we could not recover. The permanent injury of one pack member whose bone fracture was set incorrectly due to an absence of the technique Russo had been quietly using and teaching. He will walk with a limp for the rest of his life. He is 19. The resignation of 4 apprentice healers who, without Russo's training and mentorship, found themselves unable to maintain the standard of care the pack expected and chose to seek training elsewhere rather than continue to fail visibly. One of them told me, on her way out the door, that Russo had been the best healer I've ever seen and the only one who actually taught me anything, and that she was going to find her. The disorganization of our medical records has resulted in 3 incorrect treatment administrations, none fatal, all damaging in various degrees. The medicinal garden Russo maintained has declined significantly. No one else understood the specific cultivation method she used. Some of the rarer plants are already dying, and beyond the medical sphere. The 3 packs whose relationships with Glacier have been quietly maintained through Russo's secondary role as an informal mediator, a role I did not know she was performing until all 3 relationships began to deteriorate simultaneously, had withdrawn from 2 trade agreements. One has elevated a territorial boundary dispute that had been in quiet negotiation for 2 years. I have been attempting to manage these conversations, and I am not, I will admit in this record, as good at it as whoever was managing them before. I discovered that Russo had been managing them. I found her notes. 14 months of careful, detailed notes on 3 separate interpack relationships, tracking the emotional temperature of each, noting intervention points, recording what had worked and what hadn't. Notes that no alpha had authorized her to keep, because no alpha had known she was doing the work they documented. Bowen read those notes. He sat in my office for an hour with those 14 months of Russo's careful work spread across my desk, and I watched him understand something that should have been obvious from the moment he felt the mate bond snap into place at the equinox gathering. She had been remarkable, quietly, consistently, without recognition or reward, remarkably capable across a range of domains that our pack had desperately needed and had been too blind to see. And he had looked at her at the equinox and seen nothing. The healer's apprentice, the background figure, the invisible girl. Find her, he said, when he finally stood up. I said, we've been looking. We had been looking. I had sent trackers to the northern border immediately upon confirming her departure, then expanded the search into the neutral territories. But Russo had left no trail that our trackers could follow beyond the second day, which was itself a piece of information about her capabilities that none of us had registered, because rogues and unskilled runners leave trails, and skilled wolves who do not want to be found are another thing entirely. Russo White had not wanted to be found. Our best trackers had come back empty. The merchant account reached me in the 6th month. He had passed through a valley in the northern mountains. He said, a new settlement, well organized, with a healer he described as the kind you'd walk 50 miles to see. He described the instrument she used. He described the settlement's apparent efficiency. He described the wolves he'd seen, capable, purposeful, apparently thriving. He described the woman who ran it. I said, what was her name? He thought about it. White, he said. She introduced herself as Alpha Russo White of Ashran. Alpha. She had named herself Alpha. I brought this to Bowen. He was quiet for a very long time. She founded a pack, he said finally. She founded a pack. I confirmed. He stood at the window for a while, looking at nothing. Is it? He stopped, started again. What kind of pack? Based on the merchant's account, the kind that works. She would have done this for us. She was doing this for us, as much as she could from an invisible corner. And we. Yes, I said, and we. Chapter 7. The Summons They Sent. The Glacier Messenger arrived on a Tuesday. I was in the medical building when he appeared at the valley's entrance, and I knew before I saw the seal on his letter what he carried. I had been expecting it for 2 months, had been expecting it, in truth, since the day I left, because I had understood Glacier well enough to predict that the realization of what I'd taken with me would come eventually. The only question was what form it would take. The letter was from Rashford, not Bowen. That was interesting. Alpha White, I acknowledge your title, which you have evidently owned. I am writing on behalf of the Glacier Pact to formally request a meeting between our leadership and yours to discuss matters of mutual concern. We are aware that our Pact's welfare benefited significantly from your contributions during your time with us, and we acknowledge that those contributions were not recognized or compensated appropriately. We would like to discuss possibilities for formal collaboration, reparation, or other arrangements that might be mutually beneficial. Alpha Glacier requests the honor of your company at your earliest convenience. I read it twice. Then I read the word request again, specifically, not summons, not commands, not the royal we of a Pack Alpha accustomed to telling people what to do. Requests. Something had changed in 8 months. Is there a response expected? I asked the messenger. He was a young wolf, clearly uncomfortable with the entire assignment, clearly very aware that he was standing in the territory of a pack that was considerably more organized and formidable than his briefing had apparently led him to expect. He had arrived expecting. I could see it in his posture, a small, struggling rogue community led by a female wolf who would be grateful for official attention. Instead, he'd been escorted through a settlement that functioned with quiet, evident competence, by wolves who moved with the purpose of people who knew exactly what they were doing and why, and who had treated him with the polite, measured regard of people who had nothing to prove. A response at your discretion. Alpha, he said, because someone had apparently coached him to say that. I considered. Lucy was at my shoulder. She said nothing. She had learned, in 8 months, the particular way to my silences and which ones to fill. Tell Alpha Glacier, I said, that we will meet, on our terms, in a location of our choosing, on a date I will communicate in my own time. The messenger nodded and took his leave. I watched him go, and I felt the ghost of the mate bond stir faintly, the thread to nowhere, the cold reminder, and I held it the same way I had learned to hold old pain, with acknowledgement, without indulgence. Are you going to see him? Lucy asked, once the messenger was out of earshot. Yes, I said. Why? I thought about that honestly. Not the political answer, not the strategic answer, the real one. Because I want him to see me, I said. Not the version he made up, not the invisible girl. Me, what I actually am, what I actually built. I want him to see it clearly. And I want to watch him see it, and then I want to choose what comes next from a position of genuine freedom rather than unfinished business. Lucy was quiet for a moment. That's healthy, she said, with a tone of someone slightly surprised. I've had 8 months of practice, I said. Chapter 8, The Meeting. I chose a location equidistant between Glacier and Ashran, at a neutral meeting house that Interpack traders use regularly. I sent a location 3 days in advance with 2 conditions. I would bring 4 of my people. They could bring 4 of theirs. No warriors in formal battle array on either side. This was a conversation, not a display. They agreed to both. I arrived first, because I intended to. I was wearing Ashran's colors, deep green and gray, practical and clean, the colors of a settlement that had made itself in the wilderness and was not apologizing for it. My 4, Lucy, whose presence was the equivalent of a strategic assessment, Ren, the young metallurgist, because I wanted Glacier to see what overlooked capability looked like when it was given room, thereon, our weather reader, because I trusted his instinct in novel social situations, and Pell, Russo's former apprentice trainee from Glacier itself, because I had found her wandering the neutral territories 3 months after my departure and given her the training she'd been promised, and because her presence at my side would communicate something that words couldn't. Pell, specifically, had asked me if she could come. I want them to see what they had and lost, she said. Yes, I had told her. I know exactly what you mean. Bowen came in first. I had not seen him in a year. He looked older, was the most accurate word, in the way people look older when they have been carrying something heavy. The particular aging that comes not from time but from weight. He stopped when he saw me. Not the polite, categorizing pause of the equinox gathering. A full stop. The kind that happens when something you thought you understood has revised itself so completely that you need a moment to process the update. I let him take that moment. Then I said, Alpha Glacier, thank you for coming. My voice was even. Warm, even. Not performing warmth, but genuinely experiencing it. The warmth of someone who has done enough healing that encountering the source of an old wound no longer requires bracing. He sat across from me, with Rashford at his right and 2 senior pack members I recognized filling the other seats. He looked at my delegation, at Lucy, at Ren, at Theron, at Pell, and I watched him register Pell specifically, watch him understand what her presence meant. Russo, he said, and then caught himself, Alpha White. Either is fine, I said. Rashford spread his hands on the table. He was, I had always thought, a more honest man than his position allowed him to be, and the past 8 months appeared to have burned away some of his political caution in favor of straightforwardness. We want to understand what happened, he said. That's not an accusation. I mean, we want to understand what we failed to see and what we failed to do and what the actual damage was, because we owe you an honest accounting of that. I looked at him for a moment. That's a better opening than I expected, I said. We've had time to think, Rashford said. Bowen had not looked away from me. He was doing the thing I had wanted him to do for a year and a half, actually looking, not past, not through, not the polite registration of a person in a designated role. You felt the bond, he said, at the equinox, 14 months before the marking. Yes. Why didn't you? What would you have done? I asked quietly. If the girl who refilled your wine goblet had walked up to you the morning after a festival and told you she was your fated mate. He was silent. I know the answer, I said. I knew it then. I was low-ranking, unremarkable in all the ways your pack measured remarkability, and I had watched how Glacier treated claims that complicated the social order. I waited because I believed, I needed to believe, that if I was patient and present and gave everything I had, eventually someone would notice I was there. I noticed, he said. You noticed the bond. I said, you did not notice me. The distinction sat in the air between us. I chose what was easy, he said, what my pack expected, what would make the politics work. And the bond was uncomfortable. It pulled towards someone I couldn't reconcile with the plan I already had, and it was easier to not reconcile it than to look at it directly. "I know," I said. "I worked out the shape of it eventually." "Are you?" He stopped. "Is there anything that could be?" I held up my hand, gently. "Let me tell you what I want from this meeting," I said. "Not everything I might have wanted a year ago. What I actually want today from this position, which is a position of having built something real with people who see each other clearly." He waited. "I want formal recognition of Ashran as an independent pack with territorial rights to the valley and the surrounding highland. I want a trade agreement. Our medical expertise and the resources we developed in exchange for goods and materials we don't yet produce ourselves. I want Pell formally released from her apprentice obligation to Glacier so she can hold a position in Ashran with a clean title. And I paused. I wanted on official record that the medical advancements attributed to Aldrich over the past 11 years were developed by me, not as punishment of Aldrich, who is old and not a malicious man, as correction of a record that is factually wrong. Rashford was already writing. Bowen was still looking at me. "And personally," he asked, quietly, not in front of the others. The question was low enough that only I caught it. I thought about the ghost of the mate bond, the thread to nowhere. I thought about the valley where I'd sat in the grass and felt my wolf settle for the first time. I thought about 31 wolves who called themselves Ashran and meant it. "Personally," I said, at the same low register, "I am not the person I was at the equinox, and you are not the person you would need to be. And I don't know if those two truths leave any room for what you're asking about. But I am not close of finding out, slowly, carefully, with eyes open on both sides." He absorbed that. "That's more than I deserve," he said. "Yes," I agreed. "It is." Chapter 9. What She Chose. The trade agreement was signed within a week. The territorial recognition followed. Glacier's formal acknowledgement of Ashran as an independent pack was a first domino, and 3 other neighboring packs followed within the month. Because that is how these things work. Legitimacy is partly a matter of the first person willing to say the word aloud. Aldrich sent me a letter. It was short. It said, "The record has been corrected. I am sorry it took this long. The apology does not cover what is owed, but it is sincerely meant." I wrote back, "I accept it. Take care of your joints. The compound formula is enclosed." I enclosed a formula. Some debts you forgive not because the other person has earned it, but because carrying themselves nothing. Pell advanced 3 of the healing apprentices. She was training to the next level of certification in the same month. She came to find me in the medical building the evening after, glowing with the specific joy of a teacher watching her students become themselves. "You gave me this," she said. "You had it," I said. "I just gave you the room." Ren finished a set of surgical instruments that were, by my measurement, better than anything I'd had access to at Glacier. She was developing a new alloy. She had started sketching designs for instruments that addressed problems I hadn't even known I had until she showed me the sketches, and I immediately understood why they were solutions. I told her she was extraordinary. I said it specifically. "The alloy composition you identified last week is genuinely new. I checked the texts I have access to and it doesn't appear in any of them. You developed it from scratch. That is remarkable." She cried a little and then was embarrassed about crying, and then I told her that being seen clearly sometimes makes people cry, and that was completely reasonable. "Are you happy?" Lucy asked me one evening, standing on the ridge overlooking Ashran in the last of the autumn light. I thought about the question properly. "I am something better than happy," I said. "I am necessary. In the way that actually matters, not necessary as a function, not necessary as a role that someone designed and slotted me into, necessary the way a central beam is necessary, because what I contribute is load-bearing for something real." "That's a very healer way to describe joy," Lucy said. "I'm a healer," I said. "It's how I think." "And the other thing." She didn't name it. She didn't need to. I watched the valley in the light, the fires beginning to appear in windows, the small purposeful movements of wolves who had all found their way here through some variation of the same story, and had made something better on the other side of it. Bowen is coming next week, I said. Not officially, not as Alpha Glacier on pack business. Just himself. To see the valley, to have a conversation that isn't about trade agreements. And I don't know what happens after that, I said. I genuinely don't. I don't know if the bond there's enough left in it to rebuild from, or if what we were to each other was always going to need to be something new rather than something recovered. I don't know if he is, in his bones, the person he would need to be for this. I don't know if I want him to be, or if I built something here that is so entirely mine that the idea of folding another person's needs into it is complicated. All of that sounds very uncertain, Lusa said. Yes, I agreed, but it's my uncertainty, not uncertainty about my worth, or my right to take up space, or whether I deserve to be seen. Uncertainty about a choice I'm making from wholeness rather than from lack. Lusa nodded slowly. That's different. That's everything, I said. Here is what I know now that I didn't know when I stood at the back of that ceremony watching a man mark the wrong woman, and felt my world rearrange itself. Visibility is not given. It is not owned, not precisely. You cannot accumulate enough good work, enough quiet excellence, enough patient waiting, to force someone to see you who has decided, consciously or not, that seeing you would cost them something. Some people look at you and see a function, a role, a useful presence that exists to serve a purpose and can be relied upon to continue serving it without requiring the inconvenience of genuine acknowledgement. The only answer to that is to leave, not in rage, not in dramatic gesture, but in the quiet, certain way of someone who has done the math and understood that the returns on staying have stopped covering the cost. What I took when I left Glacier was not vengeance. I did not plan for them to suffer. I did not engineer their medical crises or their diplomatic failures or the unraveling of systems they hadn't known I was maintaining. I simply took myself, my knowledge, my capacity, my time, my presence, and redirected it towards soil that was willing to receive it. The suffering was a consequence of my absence. My absence was a consequence of never having been truly seen. That sequence matters. I did not cause their suffering. Their own blindness did. And what I built in the valley, Ashran, this community of 30-something wolves who ended up here because they'd each spent years in the specific loneliness of the capable and overlooked, was not built in opposition to anything. It was not a revenge project. It was not a message to Glacier or to Bowen or to any of the people and systems that had made me invisible. It was just, what happens when you stop spending your energy on people who don't see you and start spending it on the things you actually care about? It turns out that's a lot of energy. Redirected. It builds things quickly. I don't know what comes next with Bowen. I have learned to be comfortable with that not knowing, which is itself a kind of healing. The ability to hold uncertainty without it becoming anxiety, to let the future be open without needing to control its shape. I know that I'm an alpha. I know that I lead a pack that thrives because everyone in it is genuinely seen. I know that the work I do is real and recognized and mine. I know that when someone says my name in Ashran, they mean the person, not the function. I know that I will never again make myself invisible to someone who is not willing to look. She watched him mark another woman, and she left. And no one realized what left with her until they were standing in the wreckage of everything she'd been quietly holding together, reading notes she had never signed, administering treatment she had never claimed, maintaining relationships no one had authorized her to maintain. And by then, she was already an alpha. By then, she was already home. What would you have done? Left or stayed and made them see you? Comment below. Like, subscribe, turn on notifications for part 2.